Welcome to episode 4 of Around the AJHL. My name is Nathan Crosby from the Brooks Bandits. He's Brandon Ewanchyshyn from the Spruce Grove Saints. Thanks to everyone for watching the first 3 episodes. They've been a lot of fun to put these out every week as we continue with the AJHL's return to play. Brandon, we've got an awesome episode this week. We've got Tyler King, who was just added to the front office of the Okotoks Oilers. He'll be joining us, as well as Olds Grizzlys defenseman Hoon Kim. But before we get to those interviews, let's recap the third weekend of the return to play. Let's start in the North Division. I mean, the Fort McMurray Oil Barons continue to be the story up there. And then that other cohort of Grand Prairie, Whitecourt, Drayton Valley, it just seems like it's a rock, paper, scissors kind of cohort where everyone just keeps beating everyone.
Yeah, it is. And you mentioned it. The Saints' struggles continue this weekend. 2 more victories to the Fort McMurray Oil Barons. You said it there as well. GP wins one, Whitecourt wins one, Drayton Valley wins one. You can't predict who's going to win on any certain night in that cohort. And that's just a testament to the competition here in the AJHL. And Sherwood Park continues their winning ways with 2 more wins over the Bonnyville Pontiacs. And yeah, it's going to be exciting here as one more weekend of these cohorts, a weekend off for protocol purposes, and then a fresh set of cohorts that will be probably released by the AJHL here in the next couple of weeks or so. But before we touch on that, what happened in the AJHL South this past weekend?
Pretty interesting weekend. You look at the cohort we're in Brooks with Okotoks and the Calgary Canucks. Canucks nearly pulling off their first win of the season Friday night against the Okotoks Oilers, went to overtime. Of course, Carson Dick, their captain for Okotoks, able to get the Oilers the OT win. The Canucks pick up their first point of the season. Then on the Saturday, the Canucks came to Brooks, and it was tied 1-1 to begin the second period, but then the Bandits were able to score 7 unanswered, win 8-1. Sunday, we finally got a Brooks-Okotoks matchup after we were denied one the previous weekend because of a canceled game. Great game Sunday at Payson Centennial Arena in Okotoks. Great goaltender battle. Brady Parker of the Oilers, Ethan Barwick of the Bandits. Okotoks ends up going up 2-0 in the game. The Bandits get one of those goals back from Sean Chisholm, but that would be all or as close as they would get. So Okotoks hands the Bandits their first loss of the regular season. So Brooks is 6-1. Okotoks is 7-1. So it was interesting in that cohort. And then you look at the other cohort, a good weekend for the Camrose Kodiaks. They win both of their games. The Drumheller Dragons, they split the weekend, and the Olds Grizzlys were unable to pick up any points on the weekend. So all in all, great times down here in the South.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens here in the AJHL and what they decide to go with for the next group of cohorts. Hearing there might be some rumblings of traditional South teams playing against North teams and traditional North teams playing against South teams just for travel-wise purposes. But nonetheless, a fresh set of opponents coming down the line here in a few weeks' time. And we should also mention this episode is going to come out on Thursday night or Friday morning, but the Edmonton Oilers this week, similar how the Flames did it last week, are donating their 50-50 to the Jackpots for Junior Hockey pot total this Friday, April 2nd. So be sure to get your Edmonton Oilers 50-50 tickets and support junior hockey here in Alberta.
Absolutely. And thanks to everyone who's bought a ticket so far. Brandon, I think a couple weeks ago, I compared, Gord Thibodeau's return to Fort McMurray at a place where he coached before and had success and left. And now he's come back and has reinvigorated them to Daryl Sutter with the Calgary Flames, kind of a similar story there. And I think I jinxed it because obviously the Flames haven't been able to sustain the same level of success that the Oil Barons have in the last few weeks.
Yeah, well, I mean, it'll come. Yeah, Mr. Sutter has some interesting post-game press conferences. He's always good for a soundbite at the end of the night, especially after a loss.
So we have an exciting weekend of action coming up here on the Easter weekend. So before we get to the weekend, though, we should get to the interviews. Our first guest on this week's edition of Around the AJHL is Tyler King, the Assistant GM of Business Operations for the Okotoks Oilers. Happy to have him back in the AJHL after previously working at Hockey Canada. And Tyler, how does it feel to be back in the AJ?
Oh, it feels like I never left. To be fair, probably because I really never did. I didn't shut up about the league for the last year and a half. So it really is like I never really stepped away from the junior A game. It's something, that I've had such a great passion for over the last almost 10 years now in the hockey industry. And the opportunity with Okotoks for it to come up when it did in the form that it did really almost felt predestined in a way. And really, really excited for what I've been able to get into and learn over the last couple of weeks, and what I'm hopefully going to be able to do for this organization over the next several years too.
Tyler, can you talk to the viewers a little bit about what you did the past year? You were the logistics manager for Hockey Canada, overseeing the World Juniors. What was that experience like for yourself, especially in the current situation with the bubble and everything?
It was the biggest combination of both fun and stress that I've ever had in my entire life. And most of that was due to the fact that the entire job changed, just under halfway through. I go into that organization as logistics manager, as you said, for the World Juniors. So I'm overseeing basically everything that isn't in the venue, but then also a few things that are in the venue. So things like signage and stuff like that. I had some hand in the venue, but mostly hotels, transportation, logistics around making sure teams could successfully execute their presence at the World Juniors. So that, of course, has plenty of precedent. I mean, it's been done plenty of times before by Hockey Canada. It's been done in Edmonton before by Hockey Canada. So there was plenty of historical information for us to go off of in terms of how you pull off an event that big in a market like Edmonton. The only kind of wild card was, we're also doing it in Red Deer. So that goes along fairly well until the pandemic hits. And then a few months into that, it becomes, we're actually going to do the whole thing in Edmonton, which means every single team for the World Juniors is going to be in the one city, which has not been done for a very, very long time. And everybody's going to be in a bubble. And so, by the way, you're not only in charge of making sure all the teams have hotel rooms, but also making sure they can't leave the hotel rooms, which is a very different challenge to try to address. So again, it required a ton of pivoting, a ton of very creative problem solving, I would say, as well. And then we were dealt curveball after curveball. I mean, the event seemed like it was on track, and then the pandemic got as bad as it had possibly been in Alberta right before we were supposed to start. And yet, toughed it through. It's a credit to Hockey Canada, the great relationships they had with our government partners in order to make sure that the exemption for the event to happen was maintained through into late December. And then after the first few hiccups with teams arriving with positive cases, once that was done and the event actually got underway with games, I would actually say it's one of the smoothest events I've ever participated in. And again, there were some advantages to that being done in a pandemic because we weren't worrying about ingress and egress of patrons. We weren't worrying about on-ice activations or things like that. At one point, we did 4 games in a single day on the Rogers Place ice surface, and you could not do that if you were trying to get 20,000 people in and out of the building at any given time. So by the time it got underway, I thought it was a real testament to the great work put in by the staff, the team that I was part of in Edmonton, and also the great staff they had in Calgary, who did a lot of work to make that happen too.
Hey, Tyler, I missed the last little bit of that just with the connection, but there were some big words in there like ingress and degress. I don't even know what that means, but is there any story you could share with us about, I'm sure there's stuff that you can't share, but is there any funny moment that you could possibly, an anecdote from that time that you could share with us?
Well, I don't mean to go, too apoplectic with my perspicacity on you, Nathan, but I'll try my best to mix one more in there. I'll give you one. So we had a fun little, not fun really. I mentioned to you that it was a big curveball when teams arrived with positive cases at the start of World Juniors, and we had to sort of accommodate that. So what happened was we basically had to extend the initial quarantine when the event started. Now, this was not a funny story at all, by the way. I can look back on it now and laugh. But I couldn't at the time because now all of a sudden we were prepared for teams to stay in the hotels, and the hotels were prepared for everybody coming from overseas to stay in their hotel rooms for 4 days, not allowed to leave unless it's an emergency or something. And then things would go back to normal. Now, for some teams, we suddenly had to extend that. And it's going to be a couple more days. It's going to be a couple more days. Now it's going to be a couple more days than that. And the sort of standards kind of came in, and we would have to filter them on down. So 2 very interesting things kind of almost threw me for a loop when it came to that. The first was our staff, we started our quarantine 4 days earlier than everybody else. The intention being that my team would be done our quarantine in time for everyone else to arrive, and then we could be wandering about as they were in serving their quarantine. Our second day in the hotel, the fire alarm goes off. And we start to think to ourselves, what are we going to do if we have 10 junior hockey teams in these hotels and the fire alarm goes off, and the fire exit goes out onto the street, which they're legally not allowed to go onto.
Oh man.
Probably gonna. So that was one that thankfully, I actually said, thank goodness it went off our second day in quarantine, because then we were able to prepare and make a plan and make all of that worthwhile. And then you wouldn't believe what the biggest challenge of the extended quarantine was, which was, of course, the hotels had to provide food to these teams as they were in their rooms quarantining. They didn't have enough plastic containers to give them food for the extended quarantine, because they'd only prepared, like we had, for the initial 4 days. They had more than enough food. They could make that work for sure. So we actually had to go and survey restaurants in the downtown core of Edmonton and find some that were willing to lend us the plastic containers that we could then take to the hotel that they could then pack the meals into, so we could make sure all the players and staff didn't starve. Thankfully, we did. Thankfully, it worked out okay. It was a pulling your hair out moment, as you can probably tell from up here right now, but it ended up working out really well for all of us, and I'm pretty proud of how we made it happen.
Oh man, nightmares back to Grand Prairie in 2018. We had the same thing happen to us with the fire alarm, and it was cold.
Tyler and I had a fire alarm, the Bandits had a fire alarm in Grand Prairie as well at the hotel across the street from the arena. Yeah, that was a couple of years ago.
Interesting. Maybe it's a tactic. We'll have to we'll have to get Cade Mason back on to confirm or deny. But
Absolutely.
Talk about your talks and relationship with the Okotoks Oilers. When did they first pop on your radar, and how excited are you to be back in the league working for another great franchise like the Oilers?
Well, the second part of your question is the easiest one to answer. Like, insanely excited to be a part of it, especially in the role that they've created for me. It kind of came together over the last few months. What ended up being clear from Okotoks' perspective is that they were looking for someone to help push some elements of their franchise to the next level. There's no question that Okotoks has established itself as one of the absolute best in the country on so many levels, particularly the on-ice product, moving players on to the next level, relationships with NCAA schools, and frankly, in their engagement with their community, which is extremely supportive. And the Oilers have been one of the leaders in the AJHL in terms of attendance. You know, as someone who worked for Brooks for 4 years, I was in Payson many times seeing it packed to the gills with people. But I think everyone sort of knew as well that as much as Okotoks had done, there was so much more that it was also capable of. And they started to move in that direction. For example, when they got their video board at center ice at Payson, started trying to up their game on the game presentation side of things. And it just so happened that they decided they wanted a Tyler King type to help push those elements forward for the franchise. It just so happened to be, my luck that the Tyler King type they ended up contacting was me. And I ended up coming in a couple of weeks ago to try to start that process anew. I can't say enough about the great, how accommodating the Oiler organization was, the board of directors, head coach and GM Tyler Dice, chairman of the board Wayne Lowinger, all just incredibly enthusiastic about what I could bring to the table, and also extremely enthusiastic about giving me the ability and the authority to implement a lot of the things that I talk to them about. It's rare that you see, organizations that have had a way of doing things for a long time that are immediately open to new ways of doing things. But this is an organization that's just like that. And I'm really looking forward to what that's going to mean for them in both the short and the long term as well.
You look at some of like the infrastructure you already have in place there. I mean, it's a beautiful arena, one of the newer arenas in the AJ. Always love going there. And you're right. Like I can think of the last Brooks Okotoks playoff series when we were allowed fans. There's some great crowds in there. And now you have the video board to just add another element to that. Well, what kind of what's your goal then in the more of a long-term goal with the team?
Well, the long-term goal, hopefully, is to do things that no other team has done to this point. I mean, I've been involved now with 3 different AJHL teams, and it's so weird that I always join them the year after they get a video board. That was the case in Fort McMurray in 2013. That was the case in Brooks in 2016, and it's the case in Okotoks now. But roughly 1 year after they get a video board, I get involved with ensuring it's being utilized to the maximum extent possible. And I think that's something
you come with the video board.
Exactly. Yeah, that should be a package deal from here on out. Exactly. But it's kind of funny, or either that or I follow the video boards around to try to just shoehorn my way into various franchises. But it does kind of speak to something that's happened, I think, over the last 10 years. Junior A teams, they always do, want to continually strive for self-improvement. And a lot of them think that, a video board is a great way to do that. It certainly is. But the physical piece itself is not enough to really have an impact on your franchise. It's really about what you put on the video board and how you utilize it to engage fans and really create a nice in-rink atmosphere. You know, there are plenty of rinks around the country where they've got all the technology, they've got all those modern amenities, but they don't do anything with it. And then that's why you have fans who will say that they prefer the old school rinks, because some of them do more with less as compared to what other teams do with more. So in the case of Okotoks, you're absolutely right. The infrastructure is there to do some amazing things, particularly after the rink was twinned recently. It set them up to be a potential great spot for future events, both AJHL based and I think outside of that umbrella as well. They could do a lot to really help spur attention towards the town of Okotoks too. So I'm really looking forward to keeping pushing that in the direction that we did in Brooks. I think Brooks established itself very quickly as being number one in terms of digital media presence, in terms of game operations, and that wasn't me causing that. It was a huge team of people that were able to make that happen with the Bandits. In the case of Okotoks, I've got the advantage of a lot of people really of the same mindset, and unfortunately, we're in a state right now where we don't know what the future looks like. We're all hoping that when we get to fall, there's going to be an opportunity to really accomplish those same kinds of things that teams have been trying to do over the last 10 years or so.
You think back to the Payson in the 2018 championship when that place was packed for game 1, 2, and 5. Just a great community that you got in Okotoks to work with. Tyler, you're going to come back into the AJHL. Obviously, you're going to work primarily for the Okotoks Oilers, but I would expect nothing less from you than to try push some things at a league level. What are some things that you hope the AJHL starts to implement now and in the future?
Good question. I mean, the great thing is there's such an awesome opportunity for the league to really push the digital media side, I think, of organizations. There's been some efforts done to that point or in that area over the last few years, but there's potential, I think, to do a lot more. Brandon, I remember the last time there was an AJHL showcase, you and I thought did a great job teaming up and bringing the equipment from Brooks down to up to cameras, I should say, to broadcast some select games and really try to push the envelope there. That was very much an experimental thing that we did, but I think it worked out really well. I think both of us were really looking forward to following up on that in years future. But of course, there hasn't been an opportunity to do that yet. So that's one league property that they can certainly do a lot with. There'd always been discussions as well years and years back about how technically the league has the broadcast rights to its playoffs. So if it wanted to come in and really help to enhance things when we get to, league final time, or, a great example now is with this restart season, who knows what it's going to look like after the next set of cohort games is done. If they want to find a way to award an AJHL championship nonetheless, maybe that can be a great opportunity to really showcase the league to a wide audience and show just how great the quality of hockey in this league has always been. But off of the digital media just for a moment, I think a real big opportunity at the league level is for better coordination between all of the franchises in terms of off-ice operations and in terms of business operations. Simple fact is we haven't had a marketing meeting in quite some time, and I always got so much value out of learning what other teams are doing. That's something I've tried to do, even just my first few weeks now on the job in Okotoks, find out what I've missed over the last year and a half, because there's lots of franchises that are doing things so much differently from what they were just a few short years ago. And it's the innovation of the individual franchises in the AJHL that I think is helping to drive the overall profile improvement of the league as a whole. I think we really want to harness that as a group. I think we want to make sure, although we're rival teams, really we're all pushing in the same direction. And it's that old saying that a rising tide floats all ships. That's something that we could really see in the AJHL over the next few years. We just need everybody talking, everybody coordinating, and everybody trying to find new ideas that I think can work for everybody and make us all look really good in the future.
One final one for me, Tyler, and it's just a more of a COVID-related question. And I think right now we're all very thankful that the AHS has approved the return to play, and we're already 3 weeks deep into this season, and it's going for the most part very smoothly. But we look ahead to fall, and I think everyone, the phrase everyone's using right now is when things get back to normal in the fall, and we can have a normal season start on time. But how do you think this year and COVID has changed the way teams are going to handle their day-to-day operations moving forward?
I mean, and firsthand that it's changed things massively. In the case of the Oilers, it's interesting because I've come in with a great opportunity to really try to get the most out of what we're doing right now. So a great example is, although they can't have fans in the building right now, they've got this great digital infrastructure that can really be well served for fans who are watching online, for, viewing parties at local restaurants. Well, I shouldn't say parties, that wouldn't be proper. Viewing opportunities at local restaurants, let's say, to try to stay on the right side of regulations and the like. There's great opportunity to do a lot of really good things like that. And then the question becomes, how do you put yourself in the best possible position to get as back to normal as possible when we hit the fall? And that's something I've got to do, over the next few weeks here in Okotoks, is, reestablish those connections with local community partners. And as we like to say, stakeholders, not just talking about sponsors and the like, but government partners as well. I think a lot of people realize that there's going to be huge pent up demand for people to participate in spectator sports when we get into the fall, because no one's been able to buy a ticket to go to a hockey game. The thing I relate it to is, I remember in 2012-13, I think it was 12-13, when the AJ season overlapped with the NHL lockout, and attendance for every single team massively skyrocketed, like to an insane extent. When I was in Fort McMurray at the time, we had all seats sold out for almost every single home game. That's never happened again since that year. I think the pent-up demand is going to be very similar. Even if AJ season does overlap with the NHL in the coming fall, you're going to have a great opportunity to harness that enthusiasm in a lot of these local communities. So we've got to make sure we're prepared for that, and we've got to make sure that, I think, corporate partners, community partners are aware that that's going to be coming down the pike for a lot of these organizations as well, to make sure everybody benefits from them. I think as tough as this past year plus has been for every franchise in this league, it's a credit and a testament to them and to the league itself that it looks like everyone's going to be able to hold on and make it through this, probably the toughest time in the history of junior A hockey. And wouldn't it be great to be able to say, coming out of that, we had the greatest boon of attention and improvement of the junior A game and the ability to market it that we've ever seen. I think that'd be a great way to see us on the rebound for sure.
It would be wonderful for sure. As always, TK, we appreciate your time. Lucky and stoked to have you back in the AJHL, and really looking forward here to a lot of things that you're going to bring up. First off with the Okotoks Oilers, and then as a league level as well. So thank you for your time today, and we'll see you around here in the future.
We're really excited to have you. We're really excited to have you back in the league, and especially in Okotoks. We'll be seeing a lot of each other. So looking forward to it.
Appreciate it, guys, and been loving the show. Keep up the great work.
Our guest this week on Around the AJHL is defenseman for the Olds Grizzlys, Hoon Kim. Hoon, it's great to talk to you. It looks like we're catching you at your billet's house.
Yeah, just got home after practice and actually just got out of the shower. So thanks for having me on. Absolutely.
How have things been since the return to play? We're now 3 weeks in, and you add another week of that lead up with the practice. How's everything feeling out there?
Good. I think guys are starting to really get into swing of things again. The pace is definitely picking up for sure, which is good, and it's just kind of good to be back.
What do you do in the time in between from November all the way up until March to stay fresh and keep your legs under you, stay in shape, assuming that you guys would get to come back and play some hockey this year?
Yeah, so our kind of team went into it with the mentality that it would be kind of a mini off-season kind of idea. So we kind of kept up with the boys doing Zoom workouts and whatnot with Scotty. So that was good with keeping us in shape.
You mentioned Scotty, so we got to talk about your path to Olds. I mean, I remember watching you in the 17-18 season with Okotoks. So you've been around the league now, and you look before that, you were at the Edge School. Scott Atkinson was there as well. So you must have a very good relationship with this coach. How would you describe your relationship with Scott Atkinson and how he has helped you develop?
Yeah, I have nothing but good things to say about him. He's a coach that really cares about his players. And back at the Edge, like, he really helped me out with my development, both on the defensive side of things and offensive side of things. And again, he's a guy that really cares about his player, and he's passionate about the game. So yeah, nothing but good things about Scotty.
Hoon, I want to ask you a bit of a development question. You played at the Edge School from 2015 all the way up to 2017. How important was it for your development to stay with the same organization, the same group of kids for multiple seasons that then led you into the AJHL?
Yeah, I think for sure that CSSHL, like the way that it's set up is almost like identical to junior, and the amount of ice you get and the way the schedules are set up with playing games during the weekend, and you have the whole night to yourself to do kind of homework and whatnot because you're skating in the morning. I think really helped out with my development.
So then you spent a couple seasons in Okotoks, then you're moved up to Whitecourt, and now in Olds. How would you describe playing for the Olds Grizzlies now that you've played for a few different clubs around the league? It seems like you found a home in Olds.
Yeah, so definitely went on quite a bit of a journey there, but really like playing in Olds. The community here is really awesome, and definitely like living here. I think when I got here, we weren't in the greatest spot, but after Scotty kind of got here, we've been through kind of a culture change. And I think, guys, if we stick to it, like, we'll be getting there pretty soon. So.
Hoon, there's no clear end in sight for this season when we talk about playoffs or a championship. What do you go into this season mindset-wise as? Just focus individually getting better, as a team-wise getting better for next season? What are some things you go into this season with, despite not having a championship at the end to compete for?
Yeah, so I think for me, going into my 20 year, with all the uncertainty, like during that time when we were at home, I think kind of just being able to come back and play games at all, just kind of grateful for. If you look over at like kind of the SJ and they got shut down and whatnot. So I think my mindset is kind of taking it day by day, taking it all in really, because like I don't really know what's going to be my last day, right? So.
I look at your cohort with Drumheller and Camrose, and it seems like a pretty evenly matched cohort, and we've seen that with the results so far through the first few weeks of this season. How would you describe the type of team you have there in Olds, and maybe the style that you guys are trying to play with this year?
Yeah, so I think we're a team that likes to stick to our kind of structure. We're not going to have any guys that are going to be popping off the screen really, but when we stick to our system and play hard, I think we're a tough team to beat. So.
When the AJHL announced that they were coming back, and obviously it's your 20-year-old season, did that give you a little bit of hope that, hey, I might get noticed now by an ACAC school or an NCAA school, and I still might have the chance to secure a commitment for next season now that I actually get to come back and play for another 20-ish games?
Yeah, that was definitely huge. Obviously, I've had like a long journey through the league, so getting that another opportunity to kind of try and get a deal to a school has definitely been I've been grateful for.
Finally, the final one for me here, Hoon. What have you, when your AJ career wraps up, what do you think you'll take away from that experience of playing in this league?
Yeah, you definitely learn a lot. I think you hear it a lot. It's like the best 4 years of your life. So I think not taking it for granted, obviously, like everyone makes mistakes, but kind of growing out of them. So yeah, just not taking it for granted and really enjoying the time you have with the fellas and your time in junior hockey.
Just building off what Nathan said, last one for me. Could you share with us your favorite memory or story or funny moment that you've had over the years playing in the AJHL?
I think my favorite moment was, I think it was playoffs, like AJHL final, my rookie year. And this was like right after the Humboldt crash. And we did a little tribute at the center ice before the game. Like guys all around the circle, and I thought that was like really cool. So that's probably my favorite moment from junior hockey, I think.
I was lucky enough to be there for that moment. That's super cool moment for everybody involved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just gonna chime in and say that that South final that year was quite the battle, and yeah, it was. I didn't want to think about it again, but that was Okotoks going to the league final that year. But here we are. So hey, Hoon, it's awesome to meet you, and we've seen you now in the league for as long as as you've been around. It's been just a lot of fun to watch you. And being someone who is from the Olds area in myself, I'd love to see that team. It seems like that it's trending in the right direction in Olds, and I'm glad that you speak so highly of the community as well.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
That'll wrap up episode number 4 of Around the AJHL. Special thanks to Tyler King from the Okotoks Oilers and Hoon Kim from the Olds Grizzlies for taking some time to talk to us this week. Nathan, another exciting Easter weekend of AJHL hockey coming up.
Absolutely. And just want to send out to everyone, have a great long weekend and a great Easter weekend with your family, and hope it's a special weekend, and looking forward to some awesome games this weekend.
And make sure to grab your Edmonton Oilers 50-50 tickets this Friday, April 2nd, as half of the pot will go to Jackpots for Junior Hockey, supporting junior hockey teams in Alberta. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you next week.